Donald Trump is the heavy favorite to win the presidency, according to a number of election forecasters. Now, this shouldn't really be surprising based on the polls we've been seeing, and Donald Trump has been ahead of Joe Biden for many months now, and that lead's actually been increasing ever since the conviction. There was a little bit of a dip where Trump was up by around 0.5%. Now he's up by nearly 1 point again in the national average. And when you go swing state by swing state, Joe Biden's in a pretty precarious position. I mean, whether it's Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, even Pennsylvania now, Trump is in a really strong position at this point in time. And obviously, if this holds, he's probably the favorite going into Election Day. And that's what the election forecasters have finally concluded. 538, for the first time ever in the history of their model, has Donald Trump the favorite to win the presidency. The first time they've ever done it in 2016. Obviously, they notoriously underestimated Donald Trump. And they did the same thing in 2020. So now into 2024, I think they're being a bit more practical, and they have Donald Trump as the favorite. They also have Republicans as the heavy favorites to win the Senate. So we're going to break down all of this, what this means, and why the forecasters have come to this conclusion, and just how bad of a position Joe Biden is at this point in time. But obviously, I have to put in the caveat, I don't think it's over for Joe Biden. It's only June of 2024, and right before COVID in 2020, many people, including myself, thought Donald Trump was on track to win re-election. So it's just to say a lot can change between now and November. But of course, we're going to get into all of that. But before we do, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing down below and liking this video if you enjoy. So the first model we're going to look at is the Economist. Now, I don't have the Economist, so I can't really break down the model specifically. For most of the cycle, I believe they had Donald Trump at around a 56% chance to win the presidency. But their most recent model predicts Donald Trump at a 66% chance of winning, with Biden just at 33%. So that's a 2 in 3 chance, which is really good odds if you're running against an incumbent president. I mean, there's many reasons why this is. Joe Biden's approval rating is in the low 40s on a good day, high 30s in a bad day. So Joe Biden is in a very tough spot, to say the least. Now, incumbent presidents in America rarely lose re-election. I mean, if we go back, of course, in 2020, Donald Trump lost a pretty close race to Joe Biden, but you'd have to go back all the way to 1992 to the last time that an incumbent president lost a re-election. But it is quite a rarity in American politics for Americans to not give the president a second term. So Trump has a little bit of history going against him, but you could argue in 2020 that the history was against Joe Biden, and he overcame that, albeit very narrowly. Now, you know, Joe Biden's position is precarious, not just because his approval rating is terrible in the red parts of the country, that's to be expected, but his approval in swing states isn't just 4 or 5 points below water, but in many cases it's high double digits. You look at Pennsylvania, 23% net approval rating, negative. Michigan, negative 23. Georgia, negative 26. Arizona, negative 30. Nevada, negative 26. These are abysmal numbers. Wisconsin is probably Joe Biden's best state. He's at negative 10. But this is why the models have Trump as the clear favorite. Biden's numbers are not recovering in these states. And among key demographic he needs to sort of cobble together his coalition, the coalition that won him 2020, he's doing terrible with younger voters, with black voters. He's doing very bad for a Democratic president. And as of right now, Joe Biden is only above water in 4 states. There was a point where he was only above water with 2 states. We made a video about that a little while ago. He's since bounced back in a couple of blue states, but again, all those blue states were sort of within the margin of error, and they're the bluest states in the country. I mean, you still go to New York, for instance, he's underwater by 6. California, he's underwater by 4. Washington State, he's underwater by 8. Illinois, underwater by 7. So even in blue states, Joe Biden's approval rating is pretty poor. Now, the 538 model is very interesting because I believe they have over 1,000 simulations with this model. And the most likely outcome, according to this model, is Donald Trump at around 290 electoral votes to 297. That's the most likely outcome, according to this model. The second most likely is Trump at around 316, which is basically the 2016 map plus maybe Nevada, which is the most likely. And the third most likely is Trump at 324, 325, which means he's winning a significantly bluer state like Minnesota or potentially Virginia. Now, I'm not really somebody who believes necessarily in the hype around Virginia, but I probably will spend another video or two talking about it because I do think it's quite fascinating that we're talking about Joe Biden potentially losing a state he won by 10 points. Or I should say entertaining the idea, because I still don't think Joe Biden loses Virginia at the end of the day. But the fact that we're even talking about it shows you how bad of a position he is to win re-election. And now you have a number of key Democrats Jim Carville, who is a big Democratic strategist with the Clinton administration, finally saying that Joe Biden shouldn't have run for re-election. And a lot of Democrats are very worried about the prospect of a Trump second term, and the models are finally starting to reflect that. And, you know, Decision Desk again came out with more polling on Virginia and Minnesota, two very blue states. And in the state of Virginia, Joe Biden is underwater now by 0.2% in an aggregate of 18 polls, which again is very remarkable because Virginia is a state that Biden won by 10 points. The state of Minnesota, Donald Trump now leads in Minnesota by 1.6, which is incredible. Donald Trump has never led in the state of Minnesota ever. Not in 2016, not in 2020. Only in 2014 now is Donald Trump actually up in the polls there. Now, Trump is at 47% in Minnesota. It's not so much that Donald Trump is increasing his vote share, it's that Joe Biden is massively decreasing his. Now, at the end of the day, I expect a good chunk of these undecideds to probably break for Joe Biden. Minnesota is a very Democratic state. But again, the fact that we're talking about Minnesota in this context is terrible news for Joe Biden. We go to Virginia. Donald Trump is around 44%. That's basically his number in 2020. Now, at this point in time, I think he probably overperforms that, but Joe Biden has significantly lost support with black voters, with white voters, and even young voters, and that's why he's at 43.7. His polling is just abysmal. Again, I don't expect Biden to lose Virginia or Minnesota, but the fact we're talking about it is one of the reasons why the models have Donald Trump as a heavy favorite to win. Because you don't talk about Joe Biden losing states that are D+7 or D+10 unless he's basically done for in the swing states. Now, I'm not of that opinion. I've been giving Joe Biden a lot more credit in terms of his chances to win because I think that Donald Trump has a number of weaknesses, and the fact that his favorability has never been above 50% is a massive hindrance to him. Now, at the end of the day, it really all depends. If voters are voting with their wallets and voting based on the economy, Donald Trump is going to win 2024. If they're voting as a way to rebuke Joe Biden, Donald Trump is going to win. But if they come out to vote to rebuke Donald Trump, he's going to lose. But I just don't know if the segment of those voters is large enough this time around to get Joe Biden over the finish line. Because the numbers don't lie. This has really been a consistent trend all across the board, across multiple forecasters, multiple sets of polls. There's a reason why the Democrats are getting very desperate now in terms of their presidential strategy. Their Senate candidates are doing a lot better, but they're also being dragged down by Joe Biden. Bob Casey, Tammy Baldwin, you know, these are Democrats that were considered shoo-ins to win re-election a few months ago. Their numbers are now being dragged down by Joe Biden. And at this point in time, I don't think they lose, but their races are getting a lot more close than they should. The polls in Arizona have been terrible for Joe Biden. There's a latest poll that has Donald Trump leading by 7. Now, that doesn't help Carrie Lake. Carrie Lake is still losing by 3, which just goes to show you she's an awful candidate and should not be the Republican nominee there, but I digress. Donald Trump is doing very well in Arizona, a state that I have historically put him losing, just because of the trends there and because you do have a segment of these sort of suburban McCain Republicans that have routinely rejected him. But it seems like this time around, Joe Biden doesn't have enough support. He doesn't have the turnout or the enthusiasm to carry Arizona. Joe Biden's been polling the worst in Nevada, Arizona, Georgia. Those are all important Sunbelt states. These are states that helped him win the 2020 election. If we give Nevada, if we give Arizona, and we give Georgia to Trump, and obviously North Carolina, that puts him at just 268. Donald Trump only needs one more state to win the presidency. Those are pretty decent odds. Now, the states that remain are more Democratic-leaning states. You know, Minnesota, I think, is the least likely to go to Donald Trump. Then probably Michigan. Then Pennsylvania. And then Wisconsin. All Donald Trump needs is Wisconsin, and he wins a second term. He gets 278 electoral votes. But if he wins Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, that puts him at 297. That's below his 2016 numbers, but it's certainly a lot better than in 2020. Now, if we give Donald Trump the entire Rust Belt and Minnesota, he's at 322, which, according to 538, is not that unlikely of an outcome. It really depends how, you know, the 2nd District in Nebraska votes. I don't know if that law that passed there that consolidates the electoral votes is binding for 2024 yet. But Donald Trump is in a pretty strong position at this point in time because the conventional wisdom says he essentially has the Sun Belt on lock. This was an area that he was struggling with the most as a Republican candidate. This is where he lost the most support. But he's holding his own in the Rust Belt because the Rust Belt voters are very dissatisfied with Joe Biden. and the state of the economy and the fact that wages aren't keeping up with inflation, gas prices are still high, and just housing is becoming unaffordable. Housing has been going up as much as 30% over the past 5 years in most U.S. metros, and that's something that Democrats haven't been able to address, and voters are punishing them for that. Now, I'm not saying that anyone would have an easy fix for that, but this is how voters are thinking when they go into the voting booth. So the fact that Decision Desk, 538 have Trump as the favorite is obviously very big, because these polling firms have always underestimated Donald Trump. So the fact that they're giving Donald Trump the edge in this election is certainly a big deal. The real question is if he can drive it home in places like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, because these are the states that are going to decide the election. I think it's very unlikely at the end of the day that Minnesota goes to Donald Trump. And Michigan is still sort of up in the air, but Donald Trump can afford to lose these two states and still win the election, provided he has Nevada, Arizona, Georgia. Trump could even lose Nevada. If he wins Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, he still wins. If he loses Pennsylvania but wins Wisconsin, loses Nevada, he still wins. So as of right now, the map is sort of in Donald Trump's favor. But again, I think the biggest hurdle is winning Wisconsin, winning the Rust Belt states. That's going to be the real challenge. He pulled off that miracle in 2016, but the real question is, can he replicate it? Past election results since 2020 say that it's going to be really tough, because other Republicans have really struggled to win in these states. But given Joe Biden's numbers and Donald Trump as a candidate, potentially he could pull it off. So as of right now, polling firms are saying Donald Trump is the favorite. They're basically just lining up with where the polls have been for months now. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Please give a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification so you miss any more videos I put out. As always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next